Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to give my support to this resolution. I see that the honorable member who led on this resolution and the Ministry of Finance continue to find innovative ways and instruments of giving support, even where the government may not have the liquid capital, but that we continue to ensure that even if it is in the form of a guarantee for the partial amount of this loan from the Caribbean Development Bank, that we are still backing up our national and Caribbean institutions. And I think that this kind of support is important. Now, I heard it mentioned by one of the earlier speakers that the University of the West Indies delivers world-class education. And I believe that that is true. I believe that the work that this government has done to make sure that we not only reinstate free tertiary education, but that we send a signal to young people that whether it's other tertiary institutions, whether it's SJPA or the Barbados Community College or other areas endeavor, because sometimes I feel that people feel that the university is almost an intimidating institution in some regards. And I feel as if, regrettably, there are still some people who feel that this is the kind of place that only certain people go, and that is why I so emphatically support the intervention of my friend, the member for St. Michael South, because he reflected, and he may have noticed that I was transfixed during his intervention. I was listening very carefully because in many ways, I feel as if his growing up and mine, and perhaps that of the member for the city of Bridgetown and several others of us in here, and maybe yours, sir, but a little bit behind in terms of time. But I feel as if I could have been telling that story from Haggett Hall as he was telling it from the Pine. And in fact, those of us who know him by another name from the Pine, from going over there and watching football, I won't say what that name is because I don't want to out him in other stories that others might have. But that reality of being the only person from a village or from a neighborhood that went to university, of passing on the street and other people's families and other households feeling proud of you, that you were able to go to a university and to stay focused on your education, because the truth is that this matter is not just about going to UE, going to Cave Hill. It is that support that we got from our communities was also a sense of pride in staying focused on your education, on staying focused on understanding what you wanted to be, and pushing and pressing through to get there. I mean, in many ways, for our parents, it was a fight. Because sometimes the physical environment in which you grow up is not really conducive to the kind of life that you want to lead later. I mean, let's be real about it. Sometimes it is such a difficult place to be that literally when you are walking home from school, keep your head straight, do not look left, do not look right, keep walking. That is the kind of environment sometimes. And so it's not just about going to UE and getting a degree. And that's why the reinstatement of paying tuition fees, of free education, is also important that it was relevant for other tertiary institutions. And I think that it is important that this government document and regularize and say exactly what are those programs of learning, because there are still some people who feel it is only UE or it is only BCC. And really, it is a commitment to the very act of staying focused on continuing to learn, whether that be at UE or SJPI or other kinds of tertiary institutions. But I think it's important that we make people aware of the kinds of, the varied programs that this government is supporting in response to a previous government that did not find these things important. And the honorable member whose intervention I just referenced also made a point about this notion of I think, therefore I am, and the very act of education being important. And that is not just for the edification of education, but it is also for being able to use it to earn. That is important. But more and more, I feel as if the very act of gaining knowledge, of applying knowledge, of speaking to each other, of hearing each other's ideas, that is almost becoming lost now. And so there is an extent to which the act of learning, no matter where it takes place, there is an extent to which the act of learning has value. The act of exchanging ideas has value. And as we move around in our communities, in our constituencies, I recall having a conversation in 2016 with a young man from Bannisterland who since, sadly, has passed on. But a young man who had a lot of leadership in that community. And, we were talking and he asked me, what you come here to do now? What is it that a fair question, what is the value that you expect to give to the government and the people of Barbados? So I started talking to him about what was wrong with the economy.
I remember we come from a good place, Martindale's Road.
Martindale's Road, Bannister. I know you would know about such things, sir. But he asked that question, and I started talking about what was wrong with the economy and what was wrong, why it was not benefiting people the way that it should. And he started to talk to me about these issues of the value of the currency. Why the truth is that we had already had an internal devaluation because the purchasing power of his dollar was diminished. And sir, if you would allow me, because he has since deceased, if you would allow me to reference his name, Malo. The kind of knowledge and the perspective that he was able to share with those other young men, they had not targeted university education, or perhaps even BCC, but they would sit together and learn from each other. And in many ways, that is that spirit of knowledge sharing and learning and conversation is what that beacon on the hill represents. So it is not the fact that everybody will end up there. It is that we are a society that values learning. And that we understand that there are things that we are yet to understand. I think it is important, sir, to be able to look foolish. It's important to be able to look foolish. You know why? You will never learn anything if you're not prepared to look foolish, because you will start out not knowing. In my first year at the University of the West Indies, they decided that they wanted women's football and that we must have inter-faculty football. Oh my goodness. Now, I am that person who always puts up my hand for anything that is about solidarity. Anything that is about putting a team together and moving to get something done, regrettably, sir, I will always put up my hand. And so I was able to learn to play football, to go on to, and I saw recently some of the other women from that team out at a crop over event, and it was a nice reunion. But I was able to learn football with those women. I had to play on the left side. I didn't really have much of a left foot. But I had to be willing to look foolish because I didn't know. And I feel sometimes that we puff ourselves up so much in the things that we already know that we never break ourselves back down to be able to say, I don't know, let me learn, show me. And the young man who came to teach us how to play, and some of us ended up going on to play in other teams. The members in here are probably tired now of hearing me talk about all my football exploits. But it's the reason that the same member for St. Michael's South and I are committed to the development of the sport in our communities and the development of sports broadly in our constituencies. But that act of being able to look foolish, the young man who taught us was from Haynesville and came to teach these, probably in his head, these little Yui girls how to run out behind a ball. And you know when anybody starts learning a game like football, everybody behind your ball, looking silly, everybody wants to score. I mean, it was a fiasco at the time. But I would not trade it for the world because I was happy to be in an environment where I didn't know, teach me. Remaining teachable is an important part of your own growth and development that I think is important for us to return to. So we see everybody now knows everything about everything. We are epidemiologists. And we are economists. And I'm not saying that everybody doesn't have something to input or to contribute to a conversation. But sometimes it's important to step back and be still and receive information and then be in a position to apply and to share that information. And so I think that what the university represents, even for those who choose not to go, and I'll come to that in a while, is important. I think that the things that this project is set to deliver are also very practically very important. So that this issue of being able to integrate digitally into a global space, so that the university is always aware of what else is going on in the delivery of education and the administration of education. So that, for example, if a student goes to another university and spends some time abroad and comes back with an A or a B, the university doesn't then say, well, I don't know what to do with this A. I'm just going to automatically downgrade it to a C because I don't know what that A means in Peru or in Venezuela or in Spain. That is something that may sound trivial, but for many people, it makes a difference in terms of the category of degree with which you graduate. University students want to know that if they manage to go and do a semester abroad or if they come from another space, that university is in a position to understand and to put in context what the grades that they got at that other institution mean. So that they don't hear kind of this glib reply, well, I don't know what an A is at the University of Merida. So, and if it sounds a little bit personal, sir, it might be because it is. I don't know what an A is in Venezuela. I don't know what that means. So when you get back here, I'm going to give you a C because I can't be bothered to understand. And what the hope is that once the university is able to better integrate with other academic institutions, that is able to understand, to get some perspective on what is happening in other spaces and what these grading systems look like and how they're delivered and what they mean here. The issue of being able to access transcripts, being able to digitally access your records, to be able to share transcripts with other universities. I know there are university students who will say that they had to wait, and this is probably more in my time, which is some time ago, but that they had to wait weeks and months to be able to get into another program because they couldn't very easily access their own records and access their transcripts to be able to pass on to another institution to be able to move on with their studies. These kinds of things sound like bureaucracy, they're administrative, but they make a difference. Sometimes we don't realize how being late with something, how somebody not being able to access their records affects their lives materially. I see it in the healthcare system all the time, and that's why I will be happy for the day when people's medical records are also at their fingertips. So that if I need to go somewhere else and get access to a test or access to another level of care, that I can take my medical records and say, this is what it says. I know of people in this jurisdiction and others who were not able to access care that was not available here or in their country, but was available elsewhere, because their records were not available in a timely way. It affects people's lives. And so I'm hopeful that these digitalization and digitization efforts will be able to make that material difference in people's lives. But being integrated as a university into the community and into the global environment means several things. And I do have to thank the Department of Economics at the University Cave Hill for the work that they've done with this government. I think that the government of Barbados has had a good relationship, the Ministry of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment has had a good relationship with the department in being able to help us work through certain questions. I think of our work with the Population Commission and Salises being a key part of that, and other areas of work looking at prices and incomes and so on. So this work is important. But I think that the business of how we teach economics is also critical. And being able to change what we teach that economics is also critical. In 2004, I had the privilege of being able to work with Salises on this question of rethinking economics and being able to offer different kinds of courses. The study of economics is about the provisioning of goods and services to people. It is about provisioning to people. That means that if you cannot be clear on how different groups of people are benefiting or not benefiting, what you are doing is useless. If you cannot be clear on how people are benefiting, different groups, women, men, children, people with disabilities, if you cannot be clear on how your economic policies are delivering for them, they are useless. And so I think back to when, and I know my colleagues at the university will forgive me telling this story, but I think back to 2004 to 2006 when we ran that project, where we were trying to get the department to liberalize its thinking of what economics is, and to make sure it's responsive to people. It's not just about numbers. And we sought to get some work done on gender and macroeconomics. And a lot of what we got back from the department of that day was regression analysis, econometrics. Because there was this notion that the field of economics is about numbers and is about getting things to balance. Well, we know what happened with a former Minister of Finance whose only focus was getting something to balance. He was going to deliver a balanced budget, and zero was in fact all he was able to deliver. It shows you that that is not the question here. And I would really love to see the university be able to work with the government of Barbados so that the economists that come out of the University of the West Indies understand that this is about people. The reason that I studied economics was to help people, not to get a good F statistic in my regression analysis. And I want to encourage the honorable members for Christchurch East Central and the Honorable Prime Minister in their engagement with the Department of Economics to make sure that what we get out of there is really about how people will be able to benefit. To make sure, and I hope it is still on the cards, that we are able to standardize the government economic service that sets a standard for what practitioners in the area do. Because it bothers me that we have this area of economics called development economics, as if it is not all about development, as if it is not all about people. And so the member for Christchurch East Central can consider this a challenge to strengthen his partnership with our colleagues in the Department of Economics to make sure that we are not just measuring macro variables and we don't understand what this means for people being able to live and work and eat in this country. Because I do think that we can do more to make what we teach young people about economics more responsive to the environment in which they live. But I want to say also, sir, that the resolution before us really is just a small part of a comprehensive level of investment in education in this country that sometimes I don't think people understand. Because of the nature of how we do our work, we bring a bill after bill, resolution after resolution, and sometimes people tend to take things in isolation. But one really has to take these things all together. The level of investment is not just at the level of tertiary, at the level of nursery, and everything in between. But it's also in those areas that one might not consider strictly education. This country has had a school meals program for decades. Yesterday, a colleague shared some research that he had been doing with me on that he developed to address the unwillingness of certain countries to invest in school feeding programs. And he shared it in part to be able to get a perspective from a country that had for so long been feeding children as an input to education. Imagine that in 2022, there are countries, there are people who do not understand that a child who is not well fed cannot learn. And further, when we now launch the summer nutrition program, which is not about feeding children who are in school, but what is it about? It is about making sure that these children remain in a position that when they return to school or even in their own communities, they can function, they can engage, because learning does not only happen in a classroom. If I go on the Gully Hill Pasta or in Valerie, no. The number of children that are out there, they are learning something. And so this program that seeks to deliver summer feeding and learning and summer camps and access to education means that not only during the summer program, when they're engaging in the different ways, but when they come back in the classroom, that they're in a place where they're able to learn. And why is that? Because the question of being well-nourished is not one that comes up every day, today. If over an 8-week period, over a 10-week period, a child is not being well-nourished, when that child comes back to the classroom, there are all kinds of things that you're going to have to deal with. I feel that we forget that during those years of a child's life, the nourishment, food is not about just about keeping the child alive. Food and nourishment are also about how that child's brain develops, how that child's body develops, being able to be in a position where they are receptive to learning. And so all over the world today, people are trying to figure out how to keep this kind of program going. And here in Barbados, we are in a debate about whether something is a soup kitchen. I find it highly embarrassing. Highly embarrassing. And it smacks of the kind of remark that somebody would make who is only an observer of what poverty is, who is only somebody who is standing on the outside and theorizing about what poverty is, but not really understanding the poor that you are seeking to serve. Because somebody who is hungry wants to eat. And if we make it so that the acts or the business of being fed need not have attached to it any kind of analysis, it is about being fed. And so, for those who would stand on the outside as if they have tickets to a show, as if poor people are some kind of interesting National Geographic curiosity. I would encourage them to visit one of the programs in the constituency that they would seek to represent. And to understand that to the extent that we just present this as something that we are offering, if you are interested, come. If you're not interested, don't come. When I went to Belmont Primary, sir, my mother used to try her best to give us lunch. And I talk all the time about one of my favorite school meals workers who I adore to this day and who was a part of my learning and education at that school. But I remember that at that time, those school meals workers, if you took school meals today, if you didn't take it tomorrow, if you need it today, if you didn't need it tomorrow, it didn't matter. It don't matter. That's how the program is set up. And that is the way that we have been able to entrench access to social protection and access to social services, because I may need something today and not need it tomorrow, or I may not need it today. That's why it's called a net. I think the member for the city of Bridgetown wanted to call it a basin or something. But that's why it's called a net. It's meant to catch you when you need it. You may not always, but the point is to have it available to people who may be finding difficulty. And so when I think about the breadth of the investment in education, I also think about the school monitors. You know, I recall under the last government that the wages and salaries bill was used in very unfortunate ways. And that government at the time sought to fix a temporary problem with a permanent solution. And what do I mean by that? They brought into the public service in a permanent way all of these new positions and all of these new posts that they were trying to use to fix a problem that they had caused because they did not have the foresight or the wherewithal to understand how to be able to address the debt and deficit issue. And the truth is that one has to be innovative about how you use the public purse and how you use taxpayer dollars. And so one of the things that this government is still perfecting but was able to introduce is a series of temporary categories of work that allow people to work, allow higher numbers of people to work, but are also helping to transition those people into other areas of work, whether it be entrepreneurship or other areas in the public service. The point is that some of these temporary categories of work, like the school monitors, were not just about getting people employed, which is important, but also filling real need in the community. And I don't know how other members have received feedback on the school monitor position, but I'll tell you this, that at the schools in St. Michael's South Central, the feedback that I have gotten is that this is the kind of role that has really allowed us to open up what we offer in the schools and what we offer as education. Because school monitors have now evolved into being able to support teachers in all kinds of ways that they find meaningful. And so the way that we used these kinds of roles, yes, to be able to allow people to earn in a context where we needed help with COVID, we needed help with sanitizing. But we weren't just filling roles willy-nilly in order to give people a salary and in order to fulfill certain political targets, which is what the previous government did. But what we were able to do was to complete the investment in education, to say, look, our investment in education is not just about subsidized early childhood education. It's not just about free primary and secondary and tertiary education. It's also about filling gaps where gaps arise. When I think about the Construction Gateway program, and the Honourable Member for St. Philip West must be tired hearing me ask about it, talk about it, congratulate the government on it, because well delivered, it is going to be critical to being able to fill some of those gaps. We talk about this issue of micro-credentialing, which is just a big word to say, giving people qualifications in a shorter period of time. Not everybody desires, is interested in, or will even benefit from a 3 or 4 year degree. That's a fact. And if we can find a way to teach people for 6, 8, 14, 16 weeks to do something that will earn them an income, that is an important investment in education, because I know there are some who will say, on reflecting on this resolution here today, not everybody wants to go to UE. That is true. But we're not just investing in UE. We're investing in a full range of educational support, from summer camps to the Construction Gateway to school monitors to assist teachers so that teachers can then be free to deliver what they were put there to deliver. That is the full range of investment in education. I don't have time, and I'm sure the Honourable Member for St. Philip West will come in with others. I don't have time to go through all. But I want us to consider the full range of investment in education that this government has committed to. But I go further to caution us not to neglect other areas of investment in education. Because we always say that the question of culture, and we are in the season of crop over, which I hear from the member for St. Michael South is the best time of the year, and I concur. Mango season, crop over, perfect storm. But there are some who would feel as if or suggest that this notion of culture is about crop over. This notion of culture is about parties and festivals, and that is an important part of allowing our people to express themselves. But the business of culture is about how we learn about ourselves, evolve ourselves as a society in a non-formal way. That's what culture is. Culture is what happens on the pasture when there are no teachers there, or where there's no summer camp, or summer camp going home, and the children are still running about. All of that is culture. What people learn, what people share, outside of a classroom setting. I know that the National Transformation Initiative is meant to deliver in some of those areas, but that is also structured. And I think that we, and government cannot lead every conversation. I know that I'm going to have cause to say that several times in this honorable place. Government cannot lead every conversation. But I think that this question of evolving who we are has to be a part of our education conversation. Because I feel as if we are losing the grip. I feel as if understanding what it means to be a Barbados that is a republic, what it means to have a national dress in a Barbados as a republic, what it means to say something is formal or casual. This place is hot. I live in the Caribbean, right? And I think that all of the trappings of how we express formality has to resonate with who we are as descendants of people who were formerly enslaved. Mr. Speaker, some of the things that I am called on to do to show that I am in a formal environment does not sit well with my spirit, because my ancestors were never called on to do it. I learned which fork and which spoon, but some of my ancestors ate with their hands. And there's some scenarios in which, sir, if you leave here and you go to other countries and environments, the formal expression is sitting on a floor and eating with your hands. So yes, let's teach our young people to be able to fit in everywhere, but further and more importantly, let us teach our young people what is the sense of appropriateness that is going to sit well with who we are as a Barbados, as a Caribbean people. I hear conversations about etiquette, and what is etiquette? But a very superficial expression of what seems proper. So yes, let's teach people which fork, please. That's important because when the member for St. Michael Northwest goes to one of his UN meetings again, he will have to express himself in that way. That's important. But let us not believe that that is the only way to express formality or to have a sense of occasion. Let us please have a competition or invite ideas about what is a national dress for Barbados, about what it means to say that an event is elegantly casual. And if you show up in something that does not have a label, Balenciaga or whatever else, if you show up in something like that, that does not look appropriate in the style that we have become accustomed to in the post-colonial Barbados, if it doesn't look appropriate, then it is wrong. Let me tell you what is the damage from that. The damage from that, sir, is that our young people feel they have to leave home who they are and perform when they go out. But here's the thing about performance. If you forget the choreography, you're in trouble. So because they cannot internalize this sense of appropriateness, when they go out, they cannot express fully who they are. We sometimes go into business places, sir, and we hear the person who is delivering the service to us. We hear 2 seconds before they were speaking in a certain way to their colleague. They turn around and they speak in this very performative way to us. And when they turn back around, we can still see them and engage with them. Because they're not speaking directly to us, they're speaking in this perhaps less appropriate way to their colleague. Why is that? Because they're performing. We have taught that there's a certain kind of etiquette, a certain kind of performance that is proper. And what that means is that people can't really benefit from whatever we're teaching them. They do not internalize and understand and own this idea of appropriateness such that they can make decisions every day, all the time.
Your Honor has 2 more minutes.
And that is the tragedy of not having a real conversation on the cultural aspects of who we are. And I think that that is the next frontier. Now, I am not suggesting that government has to lead every conversation on that, but the conversation has to be had. The final thing I will say, sir, as I wrap up, is that these conversations, these issues, when it comes to digitalization and access and the kinds of things that are going to make education accessible, also have to take into account what we want that education to be able to do. How is it that education is supposed to serve us? It is supposed to serve us in ways that allow us to benefit from learning. It's supposed to serve us in ways that allow us to earn. But it also has to be readily accessible and readily available in order for it to have value. We keep saying as something that people just say, justice delayed is justice denied. And it's almost become something that, a bit of a mantra that people have gotten used to hearing. It is true, but that's true in many other things. So service delayed or a slow response, having something there physically, but not in a way that all kinds of people can access it, means that it doesn't really have the value that one thinks it has. And so I am hopeful from this program that the university is not just able to deliver to students in a timely way that makes it valuable to them, but is also able to continue to integrate into the international community, to bring real value to the work that we do, and to bring real value to the questions that we are trying to answer. And so I support this resolution, not just in its support to the University of the West Indies, but I support the resolution as an example of the tremendous breadth and depth of investment in education that this government is continuing, with the only caution that we have to make sure that the cultural expressions of who we are match the kind of global citizen that we're trying to create. Sir, I'm obliged to you.